Surrender on 4th May of German forces in Holland, Northwest Germany, and Denmark. At 21st Army Group Headquarters south of Hamburg, the terms are read.
The surrender terms which have been made with a delegation from the German Army. I will now read out the terms of that instrument of surrender. The German command agrees to the surrender of all German armed forces in Holland, in northwest Germany, including the Frisian Islands and Heligoland and all other islands, in Schleswig-Holstein and in Denmark, to the Commander-in-Chief, 21st Army Group. This to include all naval ships in these areas. These forces to lay down their arms and to surrender unconditionally. All hostilities on land, on sea, or in the air by German forces in the above areas to cease at 0800 hours British double summer time on Saturday, the 5th of May, 1945. The German command to carry out at once and without argument or comment all further orders that will be issued by the Allied powers on any subject. Disobedience of orders or failure to comply with them will be regarded as a breach of these surrender terms and will be dealt with by the Allied powers in accordance with the accepted laws and usages of war. The decision of the Allied powers will be final if any doubt or dispute arises as to the meaning or interpretation of the surrender terms. That is the text of the instrument of surrender, and the German delegation will now sign this paper, and they will sign in order of seniority, and Admiral von Friedeberg will sign first. Now, General Kinsel will sign next. Rear Admiral Wagner will sign next. Colonel Pollack will sign next. And Major Fried will sign last. Now, I will sign the instrument on behalf of the Supreme Allied Commander, General Eisenhower. Now, that concludes the formal surrender, and there are various matters now of detail to be discussed, which we will do in closed session.
The arrival at advanced Supreme Headquarters in Reims, France, of the Nazi surrender delegates. Colonel General Gustav Jodl, Chief of Staff of the dissolving German Army, and Naval Commander General Admiral Hans-Georg von Friedeburg. Final details are arranged inside a former French schoolhouse in the presence of American, Russian, British, and French representatives. The unconditional surrender is ratified on 7th May, with Lieutenant General Walter Beadle Smith, General Eisenhower's Chief of Staff, conducting the negotiations. The Articles of Surrender involve all land, sea, and air forces which have not previously capitulated. The enemy agrees to turn over all ships and aircraft, undamaged and unscuttled, and assures compliance with all subsequent Allied orders. General Jodl signs the surrender at 0241 hours. The Assistant Chief of Staff of the French Army, General Francois Sauvé, signs for France. On behalf of the Supreme Commander, Allied Expeditionary Force, Lieutenant General Smith affixes his signature to the surrender document. Signing for the Soviet High Command is the Chief of the Russian mission to France, Major General Ivan Suslaparov. The completed surrender document. In a brief talk following the historic ceremony, General Jodl says, in part, "With this signature, the German people and the German armed forces are, for better or worse, delivered into the victor's hands. In this hour, I can only express hope that the victor will treat them with generosity." General Eisenhower, Deputy Supreme Commander Tedder, and the Allied participants in the signing get together for informal photographs. The Supreme Commander shows the fountain pens used by the signatories and then discusses the surrender.
In January 1943, the late President Roosevelt and Premier Churchill met in Casablanca. There they pronounced the formula of unconditional surrender for the Axis powers. In Europe, that formula has now been fulfilled. The Allied force, which invaded Europe on June 6, 1944, has, with its great Russian allies and forces advancing from the south, utterly defeated the Germans by land, sea, and air. This unconditional surrender has been achieved by teamwork. Teamwork not only among all the allies participating, but among all the services, land, sea, and air. To every subordinate that has been in this command of almost 5 million allies, I owe a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid. The only repayment that can be made to them is the deep appreciation and lasting gratitude of all free citizens of all the United Nations.
In Berlin, General Karl A. Spaatz and Air Chief Marshal Tedder arrive for the formal ratification of Germany's unconditional surrender. The 9th May ceremony takes place at the headquarters of the Soviet Deputy Commander, Marshal Gregory K. Zhukov, in Karlshorst, a suburb east of Berlin. The document is more or less identical with the surrender papers signed at Reims. The arrival of the German representatives, Field Marshal General Wilhelm Keitel, Colonel General Paul Stumpf, and Admiral von Friedeburg. They enter the meeting room shortly after midnight. When they're seated, a translation of the unconditional surrender terms is read, and Keitel states that he is prepared to sign. There are 9 copies of the document, 3 each in Russian, English, and German. The first signature is appended at 0015 Central European Time. Marshal Zhukov signs for the Russians, Marshal Tedder for General Eisenhower. General Delattre of the French First Army and General Spaatz sign as witnesses. There is a brief gathering of the assembled Allied leaders after the Germans depart. Marshal Zhukov invites his guests to a dinner at which the final and complete victory over Nazi Germany is celebrated. An address by the commanding general, Pacific Ocean areas.
Never again in the lives of Americans will any day mean so much as this day of victory in Europe, which ends forever the menace of Hitlerism to all free-loving peoples. The armies of the United Nations have stuck together through thick and thin with a determination to beat the Germans that was only possible because the men in ranks who do the fighting and face the daily dangers knew that their cause was just. The victory, however, is only half won. Now America must turn its face to the Orient and finish the job so as to give us not only victory but peace. It would be a gross breach of faith to our gallant young Americans who gave their lives in Europe and on the Pacific Islands, and a grosser breach of trust to the next generation of Americans if we didn't pitch in and assure quickly an absolute and unconditional defeat of Japan. The Japanese must suffer a complete military disaster if there is to be a lasting peace in the Orient.
At 0200 on 1st May, elements of the British 50th Indian Parachute Regiment prepared aboard C-47s at Okinawa Island. Final check is made of the equipment. Objective of the mission is to support a seaborne invasion of Rangoon. The paratroopers have as their target the anti-aircraft guns along the river at Elephant Point, a few miles south of the city, near where the seaborne troops are to land. "40 planes participate in the first phase of the airborne attack. Planes head south along the Burma coast. The target is 300 miles from Okinawa. Over the target at Elephant Point, only a small rear guard of approximately 40 enemy troops are encountered, and all are quickly wiped out. Meanwhile, 2 days earlier at Rumry Island, troops of the 26th Indian Division board LSIs in preparation for the attack on Rangoon from the sea. The troop ships in convoy on their way to a rendezvous preparatory to the landing. The crews and troops are briefed as the convoy approaches the point of rendezvous. At dawn on 3rd May, LCAs move up the Rangoon River. At 0715, the first landing is effected on the west bank of the river, several miles north of Elephant Point. There's no opposition, bearing out reports by Allied flyers that for the past week the Japs had been abandoning Rangoon. A reconnaissance plane covering the landing. A heavy rain prior to the landing turns the riverbank into a thick layer of mud. LCTs arrive and field pieces are unloaded. The deep mud makes it difficult to move the equipment. A 3rd Battalion is put ashore above Creek Point on the east bank of the river, still closer to the city. The troops advance toward Rangoon without encountering the enemy. At the same time, near the harbor, minesweepers clear the waters. An enemy mine is detonated. In the afternoon, LCAs loaded with other elements of the 26th Indian Division and accompanied by various naval vessels move up the river past the initial beachheads for a landing along the city's waterfront. Defenses along the river appear abandoned, and installations in the inner harbor remain intact. Burmese citizens welcome the Indian troops. The port is found in good condition, and early reports indicate that it can receive cargo ships within a few days. Residents of the city reveal that the Japs had begun evacuation of Rangoon 3 weeks prior to the Allied arrival. Only a few enemy stragglers are found in the city. Natives flocked to the waterfront to greet the troops. Troops from the initial beachheads established down the river reached Rangoon on the following day. Capture of Burma's largest city liberated 1,400 Allied prisoners of war, half of them British and American. Aboard the USS William C. Ralston on a supply mission to Iwo Jima. She's loaded down with vital replacements for the men who are holding the strategic island in the volcano group. The beaches hum with activity as Seabees unload the Ralston's cargo onto LCTs. Landing of supplies on Iwo presented the Navy's beachmasters with one of their toughest problems of the Pacific campaigns. In addition to having no harbor, Iwo's beaches are surfaced with soft ash deposited by the Suribachi volcano on the southern tip of the island. As the rolling stock is disgorged, one of the new bulldozers goes into action and tries to smooth the way for mobile units which will follow. But many vehicles get bogged down immediately on hitting the beach. The only way to get them out is to hitch onto one of the dozers. Meanwhile, supplies are moved inshore for unpacking and distribution to the Iwo garrison. Construction work continues on the island, which is rapidly transformed into an advanced American base, halfway between Saipan and Tokyo. Gun revetments are emplaced as part of Iwo's defensive ring. Although organized Jap resistance ended in mid-March, the mopping up operations go into April with reports of occasional contact with small enemy groups. Air defense of the island is under Brigadier General Ernest Moore. Preparing Motoyama Airfield No. 2 for emergency landings of superforts returning from raids on Japan. Airfield No. 1 became operational for U.S. planes only 7 days after D-Day, 19th February. Iwo-based P-51s taking off to escort Saipan-based B-29s on a Tokyo mission. Near Japan's coast, enemy planes surprised at our fighter escort attacked without plan. Tokyo. The superforts dropped 2,000-pound general-purpose bombs. $520 tons are dropped on industrial targets, and results are reported as excellent. Iwo from the air as the Mustangs return from the 7-hour mission. Trouble causes 50 of the superforts also to land on Iwo. And here one of them is being escorted into the base. Had Iwo not been in our hands, many of the superforts would have been ditched before reaching Saipan. Flak damaged a number of the big planes, but caused no serious crew injuries. A superfort receives a new engine. Gassing up a repaired plane in preparation for a takeoff. The superforts return to Saipan. Captured Jap field gun, one of many pieces of ordnance equipment which have been taken by our troops in the Pacific fighting. The powder charge is in small flakes, Ammunition is prepared for test firing of the weapon. While exact specifications of this model are not yet available, it's in many respects similar to the Jap 75mm field gun Model 95. In this type of gun, the traversing and elevating hand wheels are located on the left side of the carriage. Jap weapons taken in good working condition or repaired by us are used against the enemy. A captured Japanese 20mm anti-tank rifle. The breech assembly is inserted in the gun, which is a single-purpose, gas-operated, magazine-fed automatic weapon. It weighs only 150 pounds, complete with shield. The weapon's armor-piercing ammunition will go through 1/2-inch face-hardened armor plate at 200 yards. The gun has a muzzle brake. Assembling the Jap 320mm spigot mortar or buzz bomb. The propellant charge screws onto the fin tailpiece. When fully assembled, the mortar weighs approximately 700 pounds. The warhead, in turn, screws onto the propellant charge. The firing tube is lifted onto the base plate and locked. The firing charge is contained in a canister which is placed on top of the firing tube. The firing charge is in various sized silk bags. The number and size of the bags used for propellant determines the distance the shell is to be fired. Troops of the 27th Division Bomb Disposal Unit detonate and destroy a spigot mortar shell found in a field on Okinawa Island. As the fuse had been previously removed from the shell, a grenade is put on the nose and then the lengthy fuse is lit. The shell can devastate an area of 300 yards. Accounts of the mortar in use describe the shell as floating slowly through the air, looking like a flying boxcar. The mortar is very inaccurate. A truck unloads a captured Jap naval 45-centimeter rocket bomb onto a rocket rack. The crude wooden rail launching device and the general inaccuracy of the rocket indicate that it's intended primarily for area bombardment. The rocket body consists of the motor, explosive case, and nose cone, the three sections being welded together. The combustion chamber contains 40 sticks of monoperforated propelling powder. Range of the rocket is estimated at approximately 1,900 yards. A group of 20-centimeter Army rockets, considered to be the most important type of rocket and launcher now used by the Japanese. This rocket and launcher has been designed to provide a lightweight weapon which will fire a heavy projectile as accurately as possible. Tests show an approximate range of 2,600 to 2,800 yards. Aircraft carrier USS Franklin, 60 miles off the coast of Japan. On 19th March, she suffers 2 direct hits from an enemy dive bomber. Crewmen fight desperately to bring the resulting fires under control. Thousands of tons of aviation gasoline are ignited. Aircraft still on the deck are loaded with bombs, rockets, and machine gun ammunition. And many major explosions follow detonation of the Japanese 500-pound armor-piercing projectiles. Flames spread rapidly from the after end of the carrier, and the flight deck is enveloped in smoke. Meanwhile, up forward, the elevator from the hangar deck shows the force of the bomb which struck amid fueled and armed planes waiting to be lifted to the flight deck. Explosions continue. Casualties mount into the hundreds. Sailors were tossed the length of the ship by the severe blasts. Individual acts of heroism are attributed to officers and men of the Franklin, several hundred of whom were trapped below at mess by the bombing. Assistance in organizing firefighters and other acts performed without regard for personal safety are credited to the ship's chaplain, Lieutenant Commander Joseph O'Callaghan. He gives last rites to a badly injured sailor. The cruiser Santa Fe is among several warships which stand alongside the badly listing carrier to give aid. Hoses from the cruiser spray the decks of the Franklin. Personnel cut off by fire on the ship's fantail are rescued by the destroyer Hickok. The line is anchored to a gun on the forward turret of the destroyer. Tongues of flame lick above the trapped sailors, and hoses from the Hickok go into action. A rescue by breeches buoy. As the flames draw dangerously close, many trapped crewmen jump from the gun sponsons onto the bow of the Hickok. The rescue ship is beginning to pull away, and others must dive overboard. A sailor climbs down the net of the Franklin and swims toward a line from the receding destroyer. Listing heavily to starboard, the carrier is still being sprayed as other survivors get away in a life raft. By early afternoon, the fires have been brought under control, and the carrier prepares for a 12,000-mile homeward voyage to New York. With flags still flying, the Franklin sails to Pearl Harbor and then through the canal on her way to New York. 772 of the crew are dead or missing, more than 300 wounded. The Franklin's deck is a twisted and charred mass of ruins as the carrier enters New York Harbor under her own power. Known in the Navy as Big Ben, the Franklin, a 27,000-ton carrier of the Essex class, was commissioned in January 1944. Today, she's under repairs at the Navy Yard in Brooklyn.